What's up, everyone? Thralls Mel here once again. I'm the Croc Nick.
And I'm Jammin' John.
And we have an album review for you. So, the 7th of February was a pretty busy month as far as releases, and we wanted to get to a lot of them. So today we are going to review Svart newest album, Wolves Amongst the Ashes. This came out also on the 7th of February on Century Media. This is the band's 5th studio album. They are from France, and they've been around since 2004. Now, these guys play like a kind of hybrid black and death metal with, well, a lot of Gojira to it.
Yeah.
It's very similar, but it's also very different. It definitely screams more older Gojira, like from Marcia Cirrus, The Link, stuff more like that. But it's definitely there. And you get it right from the intro, actually.
Yeah, and it's not a bad thing either. I love Gojira.
I love Gojira.
Gojira.
That's kind of why we're listening to it right now. Yeah. But it's very noticeable. The intro, They Will Not Take Our Death in Vain, which is really good about building atmosphere here. That comes with some interesting audio splices from some, it sounds like speeches from probably the 60s. It's real crackly audio, and then the music comes in, and even the production is very similar to from Marcia Cirrus, which is what we're jamming right now. Big, huge drums.
Well, and I like this as an opener too, because it's not like a typical interlude. Like, it starts out that way, but there's always a riff over it, and then after the whatever the audio is in the background, the speaking gets done and over with. It turns into an actual song.
Yeah, and granted, it's only like a minute and 45 seconds.
Probably, yeah.
It's still kind of a better intro than just some random ambient noise or symphonic stuff that doesn't necessarily lead into the first track very well. This is almost its own track. Now, when it gets into the next track, which it leads into very well, Thermageddon, you're instantly greeted with just nasty blackened death metal.
Yeah.
The riff structure really reminded me of like Immolation's style of riffing, but with Marduk's insane blazing speed and just ferocity. Like, this just really hit home right away. Like, dude, all right, this is pretty good.
Yeah. The interesting thing is we had never jammed Svart before the singles started getting released for this album, and I was just like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna check it out. And it was really good.
I had them confused with Svart, which is more of a Viking metal, folk metal band. Not necessarily in my style. And I have a couple albums from them. I definitely gave them a chance, but I didn't really get into it. And I confused this band with them because that's how long ago I listened to Svart. And when I heard this, actually, I thought he was playing Gojira. But we heard this, and I was like, dude, this is really good.
Yeah.
So we took a shot on this band. And honestly, I really just dig it. Very layered vocals. There are technically 3 vocalists in this. I believe the guitarist or bassist is the lead vocalist, and then everyone else kind of comes in as a backup vocal, where it's all very layered, even the growls and the clean singing. And this song doesn't use it as much, but this is something that becomes a real theme throughout the entire album.
Yeah, pretty much a staple for the vocals on this album.
Now, the next track, Art of Obedience, is definitely a stylistic shift. There really isn't a lot of the blackened elements, and even the more death metal side of it is more shifted towards Gojira again. This is going to be a running theme, bringing up Gojira.
I thought it had kind of like a tomb mold riff structure.
There were some that with the dissonance and such. Yeah. Dissonance is definitely a theme on here too. There's a lot of it. This one is definitely more groove oriented, more just kind of a nice lumbering beast of a song with, periodic breaks into like faster bits. But for the most part, this is just solid breakdown.
Yeah, except
metal.
for the bridge.
And unfortunately, this bridge we're about to bring up comes at a really strong point. This is just carrying on with this really catchy riff, and then kind of out of nowhere, this little melody comes in, and it is really disjointed. The vocals really don't match this odd lead melody that the vocals are following, or the lead is following. It's really hard to tell, but it just seems like it was kind of thrown in there.
Because that piece doesn't repeat itself.
Yeah.
Throughout the rest of the song, you don't hear that made mention of again, which makes it kind of just a oddly placed riff.
Yeah, it's just kind of there, and it really doesn't add much to the song at all. Now, the song really just ends beautifully, too, and I think... But I just kept coming back to this moment, like, why was this here? This feels like it was just kind of spliced in when it could have been just cut out completely. Yep. But I tell you what, that next track, Blessed Be the Fools, This is the slow plodding monster of a track that I absolutely loved on here.
In fact, they just released a video for this 2-3 days ago.
Oh, well, I'm going to watch that.
Yeah.
This is just pretty much one giant riff that it continuously just keeps building. And it opens up just heavy as hell. There's a little electronic flourishes in here that kind of remind me of like Godflesh and On All Mathrak. And the vocals come in and they're Latin chants.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful way to sound evil, is to chant in Latin.
I agree. Most Latin sounds kind of scary, yet beautiful. But it did. It had a real good like stomping open to it.
Dude,
too.
I loved it.
It's a good jam.
Like, this is the kind of thing where I think of a song like Gojira's Vacuity, a big stomping rhythm, and they drive this riff home. Like, they make sure it's stuck in your head, and it builds really well because it keeps getting heavier and gnarlier. And
the builds in the middle
Yeah.
section that are really cool. And that's another cool thing too about this album is you'll notice as you go throughout the songs, they all sound kind of different, yet they're catchy.
Yeah.
You know, the riffs from this album will end up in your head.
At the Altar of Beauty was one of my personal favorites. This one really dialed up the black metal. This is probably the most black metal song on here. Right away, it kind of opens up with almost like a mayhem-like blast beat with a really cool melody, but there's a hint of like Middle Eastern kind of twang to it. It's really interesting. It really reminded me a lot of Melekash, which I'm a huge fan of those guys.
And Nile.
And of course Nile, because if you think Egyptian or Middle Eastern, that's pretty much the band you
I
think
was
of.
going to say, it's pretty much where I'd go.
But this one is just unbelievably catchy. Lots of beautiful melodies and really cool transitions in this song. Like, this song really builds, and it throws in this one subtle part that I think is kind of alluding to the next track on here. It's almost more post-metal. It's more about atmosphere. It's pretty much all the drums get cut out, and you just get these really cool, kind of light, airy guitar melodies, and then it comes in with a build-up scream to really just close out the song with a nasty, nasty, heavy section here.
Yep.
But going into the next song, honestly, might be my favorite one.
I really like this jam too.
Down to Nowhere.
It sounds like that. It's really like dark, murky,
Depressive,
yet
sullen,
atmospheric, melodic. It's definitely a slower pace from anything else on the record.
and a cleaner tone that carries it, too. This is very post-metally, like, it instantly reminded me of Neurosis. In fact, the vocals kind of take an interesting turn where they're like layered, kind of groaning whispers.
It reminds me kind of the Deftones. Like a slower ambient Deftones.
Really depressed
Deftones.
Deftones.
But that whispered vocal
Yeah.
is kind of what reminds me of like Chino's whispered vocal almost.
And the guitar tone itself, like, honestly, it kind of reminded me more of like David Lynch films or like Twin Peaks. You know, if you guys have ever seen that, the guitar tone that's in there, it's, you know, this kind of almost alt country, whatever. But it's just interesting, and it really builds atmosphere. And this song builds into an incredible crescendo with really cool layered vocals, which are actually harmonizing pretty well, despite being really gruff. And that was kind of an issue for me on the album, where all the vocals are layered almost all the time. You don't get a lot of isolated spots. So it becomes a little static in terms of that cool layered effect with vocals, or like almost like a gang vocal thing. When it's done all the time, it's, you know, not as effective. But here, it really stood out. And honestly, it made me wish that they actually did some cleaner parts over some of the melodies with this layered vocal effect with all the guys actually singing. Really worked here, and it's honestly the most unique song on here. This is a true blue standout of a song.
Next in line would be the song Exoria. Now, this actually was the very first song I ever heard by these guys.
Same.
When heard the single on Spotify.
Very.
This song's disgustingly dissonant, and as I've stated before, I love dissonance on an album. I do have to say, though, this is very Gojira.
This is the most Gojira song that Gojira's never written.
Yeah.
But it's really good. It's really good. It's just, it feels a little too close to home, and it doesn't help that the band's French, too, because instantly you think, like, oh, they definitely know Gojira.
They've definitely hung out, I'm sure.
But this like really reminded me of something that would come off of The Way of All Flesh. I thought there was more focus on melody on this, because this song has a true blue hook that runs all throughout it.
Yep.
That main riff is repeated to the point where it's going to be stuck in your head if you listen to the song enough.
Yep. But the transitions that the drums go through during that solid riff that's in there, first of all, his snare drum on this song sounds like it's like this big.
Yes.
And someone is striking it with a sledgehammer over and over again.
Or baseball bat.
Or a baseball bat.
Heavy.
Yeah, it's huge. They really work in an awesome sound to their song.
I love how it flows very well. I think the blast beat section with that really killer dissonant melody, it's all very memorable. But again, it really hits kind of close to home when it comes down to Gojira. It's very similar. The last track, not as much, but this one, once again, that Nile sound comes through. The intro sounds like it could have been on a Nile album. It could have been on the last album. It could have been on any Nile album.
And it goes for a good solid, probably minute and a half. This is actually the longest song on the album, too.
And it has this interesting sort of ambience in the background. It's almost like throat singing or like a didgeridoo.
Yeah.
Probably throat singing. God, I hope it's not a didgeridoo. But tribal drums, almost a sitar sound to the guitars.
Kind of, yeah.
Builds this really cool atmosphere. And then when this song erupts, after some really cool vocal harmonies, which kind of remind me of Enslaved a little bit.
Yeah.
This song just explodes into just death metal breakdowns.
It's this really neat stutter riff.
Yep.
Like the drums and the guitars are so on point with the syncopation. It's really cool.
This song closes with an absolutely amazing melody too. And honestly, I think something that could have made that moment rise even more would be those layered, clean vocals that we heard earlier on this album. But they went with growls there, which were still effective. But I think for that kind of next level push to make this really just ascend.
Yeah.
It could have used that extra little bit, but I mean, honestly, it was a great song. And this whole album is a really interesting listen. Now, yeah, it definitely sounds like Gojira, but that's not a terrible thing at all.
Especially in today's day and age with metal, there aren't a lot of bands, I think, that fit that plateau of what Gojira offers. So it's cool to see another band kind of take on that persona when writing an album.
And there's enough elements on this that aren't just Gojira. There's stuff that is definitely more like black metal, thrashier sections, more straight up death metal. You know, there's a lot to offer in this. This is a really solid listen, which is why I'm going to give it 4 stars. I really dig this. This is definitely a band I'm going to start following and definitely look for more of their releases.
Yeah, for sure.
Solid production, the writing's good. Minor issues with this album, really, but not enough to really knock it down at all, because this is a really solid album. I dug it.
Yep, I'm also going to give it 4. Like I said, since the moment I heard this band, I knew I was going to be excited for the album because I really liked the singles. You know, while I may have only starred a few things to talk about, I like every song in this album. It's a great listen. The production on it's solid. I think it kicks ass, and I too am greatly looking forward to whatever comes from these guys. And if they ever make it out of France into the States, you can bet we're going to go see them. So.
Oh yeah. So, if you like the review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe. Because if you subscribe, you are entered in our giveaway for a Cryptopsy hoodie. Once we hit 1,000 subs, we are going to do a little sub randomizer, and one of you lucky subs is going to get a 2X Cryptopsy hoodie that we got when we saw Cryptopsy and aborted.
And let me tell you, folks, we're getting close to that 1,000 mark. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate you coming here and watching our dumbasses all the time.
Every last one of you. You're awesome.
Right, yeah.
We suck, but, whatever. Either way, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you later.